Already 5 minutes. Good afternoon, madam. This is from Ramaya. Hello.
Can she hear you, sir? Can I hear you?
Oh, I do not know.
She has to turn on the mic, sir. Yes, sir. You can go. Your voice is audible, sir.
Good afternoon, madam. This is Ramaya.
You can hear. Now she has unmuted.
Yeah. Shall we start the lecture? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I'm happy to.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Actually, unfortunately, we were waiting for the Vice Chancellor, and he is busy with some meeting. Actually, could not join. He just conveyed his best wishes. So we will start actually without waiting. We can start our lecture because otherwise we'll be losing the time.
Of course.
So, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gurmeet Singh, and today, respected today's speaker, Dr. Frena Murphy, the co-founder, Partnerships, Community Development, More Brains Cooperation from United Kingdom. Respected deans, heads of departments, research scholars, my dear students, particularly those students doing their course through distance mode. The Directorate of Distance Education was established in the year 1995 for offering postgraduate, undergraduate, and postgraduate diplomas and other need-based, market-driven, and skill-oriented courses. Now, the Directorate of Distance Education is offering 8 undergraduate programs, 4 postgraduate programs, and 8 MBA programs, including MBA General, MBA Marketing, MBA Finance, MBA HRM, MBA in International Business, MBA in Tourism, MBA in Operations Supply Chain Management, MBA in Hospital Management. And that all these programs are approved by All India Council for Technical Education and Distance Education Bureau of UGC New Delhi. On the occasion of Silver Jubilee, the Director of Distance Education, Pondicherry University, is organizing a series of lectures from distinguished academicians, administrators, management gurus, and professionals and experts from India and abroad. Most of these lectures are arranged on Saturdays for the convenience of the distance student, but sometime on Fridays because of experts' preoccupation. So I request the distance education students and full-time students, research scholars, and faculty members to make the best use of international webinars organized by the Directorate of Distance Education, Pondicherry University. I will briefly introduce my Vice Chancellor to you, and then actually we'll move on to your introduction, of course. Sorry, sir, actually we missed you, and the Vice Chancellor, he is one of the international academicians, and he is a renowned academic administrator and internationally reputed expert in the field of corrosion science and smart materials. He has taken over the Vice Chancellor of Pondicherry University. After taking over the university, he has made actually a big change in the university in terms of research project, infrastructure, recruitment, and recent COVID pandemic management on the campus. And he's decorated academician. Professor Singh has received many awards, including Meritorious Contribution Award, the Annapurna Award, the Membership of Royal Society of Chemistry, London, the Fellowship of Society for Advanced Electrochemical Society and Technology, and the Electrochemical Society of India. Overall, and he is an excellent, kind-hearted human being with a big helping hand to all on the campus. So the message actually sent by the Professor Gurmeet Singh, he actually is busy with a meeting and he was unable to actually join this, and he conveyed his best wishes to this webinar. Now, It is my privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Frena Murphy. Frena Murphy is More Brain Partnership and Community Development Expert with 20 years of experience in publishing and scholarly communication. Frena has expertise in social sciences methods, community and business and practice of scholarly publishing. After completing a DPhil in English at Oxford University, Frena began her active publishing career with Wiley editorial committee coordinator, and then in London as senior commissioning editor at Bloomsbury Academic. Frena returned to Wiley as a publisher in the Earth Sciences. In these roles, Frena developed deep expertise in publishing operations across editorial, production, commissioning, market strategies, portfolio development, and many other areas. Importantly, Frena's work as a publisher was transdisciplinary across the humanities and social, physical, and natural sciences. As a consultant, initially with Maverick Publishing Specialist, and later as the founder and director of Murphy Michel Consultancy, Frena built a reputation as an expert in the use of data-driven decision-making and scholarly infrastructure. She worked with a wide range of organizations, including the Belmont Forum, Force 11, Sloan Foundation, Bodleian Library, and the Association of Commonwealth Universities, Joint Information Systems Committee, and Institute of Physics, creating, understanding, and driven alliances between the founder, the funders, researchers, institutions, and publishers. Dr. Frena continues to be a leader in research infrastructure and particularly open data, including her role as a deputy chair of the DDE board, working closely with the executive director and other board members to define the DDE's future directions and strategy. She is a founder member of the STM Research Data Group, a member of the Research Data Alliance and the Force 11, and researcher to the Reader Advisory Board. With a holistic understanding of how things work, Frena is the keen industry watcher with a sharp eye for the points of the intersection that others often miss. Thank you very much, Madam, for accepting our request and going to give an interesting talk on the open science. Now, I would like to request Dr. Frena Murphy to deliver her talk on open science, one of the latest areas on which a lot of discussion is going on in scholarly publishing. Over to Dr. Frena Murphy.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Professor Amaya. I'm very pleased and honoured to have this opportunity to speak to you and your students, and to any faculty from the university who are able to attend today. So I hope what I have to say will be both interest and will spark some conversation and thoughts and questions from you, the audience. If you've got anything that you wish to ask, I hope that there's some time at the end. Right, so today we're going to take, I think, a high-level look at scholarly communications and the system, and why various stakeholders participate in it. And then we'll start looking a bit more closely at open science and at the sort of options that are available for individuals and institutions to participate. And I will begin. So what is scholarly communication? I mean, this is quite a well-known standard definition that captures the fact that it's not just about writing, it's not just about journal articles, but it's actually more about a wider range of outputs. It covers both formal, so that's sort of actually published and peer-reviewed, articles, books, chapters, and so forth, but there are also informal channels that are included. The examples given in the definition are electronic listservs, but we also say that things like blog posts and YouTube videos and possibly even social media interactions would also be included. Having said that, when people are talking about scholarly communications, they most universally are thinking about publishing. And that's also the implication for that is publishing, which is something that happens at the end of the research process. So after the research has been conducted and completed, and the results and the thinking, the findings and the method are all packaged up, perhaps in a journal article or in something longer, and then they're formally published, and the researchers move on to the next project. But as we'll see, this cycle, if you like, or process has been quite disrupted in recent years, and open science, open research have been some of the like consequences or ways of trying to deal with and understand and work with it that have emerged. So these are probably the main participants in the scholarly communications system, if you like. We've got researchers, publishers, funders, and research institutions. So my aim now is just to give you an idea of why everybody participates, what they're hoping to get out from it, and then to look a bit further on as to what the disruptions have caused and how things are moving around. So first of all, researchers. If you like, researchers are the one constant in all research activities. There must be somebody doing the research. So they need and want to share their research results, and they need and want to advance their careers. And I've put the publish or perish mantra there, which has historically been something that's driven, I think, researchers to publish. You could say it's not necessarily in that order. For many people, if you like, sharing their research results might be something they're not particularly keen on doing, but they need to communicate them in order to be able to demonstrate their ability and also go back to their institution and their funders for further opportunities. Publishers are seeking to provide a service to the authors to enable them to publish their research, to be able to put it on a platform and for it to be able to be seen. They're also looking to disseminate research to the customers, to the users. And just to say, by the way, that for many publishers, their customers will be institutions, where the users might be the researchers or individuals. So there's a bit of a gap there sometimes. And ultimately, publishers need to be able to fund themselves, to make money. And that can be something which, if you like, is part of just what they need to do in order to be sustainable. And that might be true for, say, a university press or for a learned society. But obviously there are commercial publishers, and I'm sure you'll know the names of many of them, for whom ultimately that is the reason they exist. It's to make the money. They happen to be in publishing, and they will then consequently be doing the publishing to the most cost-effective, but also efficient and effective way possible. Funders obviously are funding the research. This is whether they're governmental, it could be foundations or charities, and they want to be able to evaluate the success of their programs, and one of the ways they can do that is to be able to look at what's been published as a result of the research that they've funded. In recent years, there's also been a great move, particularly among governmental funders, to be able to demonstrate value to the taxpayer, who, if you like, ultimately we are the funder of any national funding projects. And there's also an interest in funders. They have increasingly an interest in how their research is distributed and circulated, and they might join, I say, like Plan S, Coalition S, and seek for there to be open access for their published outputs. So again, they'll be looking to see and make sure that the researchers are conforming to any requirements. So research institutions basically are keen to understand and be able to track the activities of their researchers. They're looking to be able to demonstrate that, if you like, to their own stakeholders, which might be a national funding and evaluation exercise. We have the REF in the UK, for instance, and it might also be as a way of attracting new researchers or other partnerships as well. They will also be needing to provide access to their own users via subscriptions and loans when you've got the subscription copyright model, and also particularly large research intensive institutions such as Harvard will have their own mandates, their own requirements for the way that their researchers behave, and in view of how they deal with their research. They might have also an institutional repository and be looking to sort of build that as a way of recording and taking advantage of their own research outputs. However, so that was the standard status quo, if you like, for much of the 20th century. But technology, especially the internet and recent developments in things like computing power, and also the globalizing of many research efforts, the huge upswell in the number of people and countries actually conducting research, means that there's a really big technology and scaling issue in terms of that model we were just looking at. And I really like this image which Alberto Pepe put out on his Twitter feed in 2012, and I've not been able to find it anywhere else, but I think it's really nice in the way that it shows that scientists, and by scientists I mean anybody that conducts research in scholarship, if you like, so that's anything in the humanities or the social sciences as well. They work in the 21st century with current tools and capabilities, but a lot of the time the systems that they're working with are very 20th century, and they're very kind of and then they package down, they flatten and squash research, and if you like, a lot of the time you'll have a lot of the very things that make the research itself rich. You've got data sets, so we've got videos, got links in and out to other projects and other people, are stripped out in order to package into a standard formal publication, and that not only makes things, if you like, a lot more boring, it actually makes them less useful. As well, because you're less able to look at provenance, versioning, be able to track down what people did next, and they basically there's a problem, and the result has become a very roughly organised mess, and it's also brought with it, I think, increasing calls since about the 1990s for everything to be made openly available. If you like, a scholarly commons of knowledge that's potentially accessible by anyone who wishes to use it and who has an internet connection. Bearing in mind, until the internet itself existed, that this wasn't even theoretically possible. But now we are increasingly having, mass access, or there's sometimes with curbs and barriers, either technical or political, or so forth. There's still great strides being made in this direction, and so the stakeholder rationales for participating themselves are becoming disrupted, are changing. So I've gone back and had a look at what who participates and why from the earlier slides. And for instance, where before I think it was very much researchers, like authors of papers or of books or book chapters, who participated in terms of who produced the research. It's now a much wider spectrum of people who could be included in the, if you like, the research effort, research production. That would be people who look after the data, either manage it or house it. We've got librarians, we've got teachers, people that write software, and also citizens. You've sort of citizen sciences, crowdsourcing, and again, so this is a much greater range of people who potentially both who need access, and that's both to see what's already there and also to provide their own contributions. Publishers are now not so much about distribution or something, holding and distributing content either in print or online form, but they're increasingly trying to find new markets when thinking about building services on that content, and that might be around analytics or providing connections or how between different entities that are housed in different spaces. It might be training resources. People learn to navigate this new landscape. There could be collaboration spaces. There's quite a lot of moving, if you like, up the chain to what would have been seen as publishable outputs, thinking about methods, for instance, or even ideas. As well, so there's quite a lot of ingenuity going on there. Partly because increasingly, the internet, people expect things to be free at the point of use, but somebody has to pay for something somewhere. So it's where you're trying to find that value that's been moving around. Funders, if you like, aren't so much disrupted. I think as perhaps becoming more discerning in their demands, whereas before there was quite a general sense that they wanted to see lots of papers, perhaps, or lots of articles. They wanted to see some evidence of people having used their research to base publications on. They're much more interested now in being able to track more closely. That could be even individual careers of people that they have funded at an early point in their career, and then thinking, did we pick the right people? Do we have good track record for boosting someone early in their career to see what they then do? They want to see where their research goes in terms of other projects, perhaps funded by other funders. They want to be able to see reuse, perhaps, of data sets that they've already paid for once. They don't want to pay for somebody to generate that, a similar data set again. They want to be able to see that repurposing economy, if you like. And also, as I say, that the mandates, the requirements are continuing to become more sort of detailed and more searching. More and more, the funders are looking for, published data, for instance, as well as open access. And I think that kind of trajectory is going to continue. Research institutions, in a lot of ways, have just seen an extension of their requirements as well. At the moment, we're still dealing with a mixed economy, if you like, where there are many subscription or pay to see, pay to view products and services. But there are also increasing amounts of open access programs, and often it's the institution that has to handle those. So again, there'll be sort of libraries or research offices that are managing funding budgets, and curating collections is shifting in emphasis from being about trying to get as much material and content for your researchers, your institution as possible, and becoming more about versioning services, and also providing remote access, which, as we know, has been particularly important in the last couple of years. And actually, even some research institutions, and in fact some funders, have themselves started providing more publishing services or publishing-like services. So, say research institutions might have a repository that they're trying to build. They might even start a university press, and to think about how to support their researchers that way. So again, the internet and technology and changes in thinking and workflows and value have brought about all these changes in the way that the various players are acting. So, I'd say the terms publishing and scholarly communications could now basically be applied to pretty much anything that a researcher might do across their entire workflow. And I think that which if you remember at the beginning, where I was saying that publishing, if you like, was thought of as something that happened at the end of the process, but now anything might be published either in real time or shortly after something's been done. It's like a data management plan could be published at the very beginning of a project, or it might be that you have to conduct all the research activities as though you're expecting to be publishing them at the end of the process. So it's very much if you like, a show you're working requirement, if you like, to get maximum marks and to show, for people to be able to trust that you took the right method and you applied things correctly, and you made good decisions, and that your final conclusions are appropriate. The thing is that the complexity of research itself means that it's going to take extra work to across all these steps that you're opening up, to be able to make them understandable to others and also reproducible. And there's a strong argument, in fact, for doing this in terms of knowledge overall, because I'm sure you can see it promotes integrity, and it also will enable far more reusability in what is being produced, but it will take longer and it is harder to do. So I think there's a growing sense that that in order to produce proper open science, open research, it's going to take either extra time or extra money or more people, or at the very least further training, in order to be able to output good quality open research resources. And this is often very difficult because certainly in the standard way to learn how to be an accomplished researcher is to learn from your seniors, people with more experience than you. But the senior researchers themselves haven't done this before. They haven't been trained in these tasks. So again, there's a bit of a mismatch in terms of requirements and capabilities to deliver. And for many people as well, it's if we like sharing your results and your work is itself counterintuitive, as if you're relying for your own advancement on your competitive edge. It makes no sense at all to let your competitors see your work before you've had a chance to fully utilize it yourself. So so again, there are some contradictions there, or if you like, perverse incentives, which still need some work. And another example, I think, of potential problems is open peer review. Early career researchers are typically very worried about whether you're delivering a critical open peer review, perhaps to somebody more senior or someone eminent in their field, could have a catastrophic effect on their career prospects. And I think that's, if you like, almost an unseen consequence. It wasn't expected, but it is. I think it's a very real, and you can imagine, social issue. That like trying to increase involvement and provide greater transparency to the research process can itself be excluding of some of the participants if they just don't feel able to take that risk in participating. So as I say, there are some ongoing discussions going on. There are various initiatives about managing parameters for debate, having new ways of evaluating researcher performance, having new metrics and so forth. But these are all still ongoing. Nothing's entirely settled. So up to now, I've been, if you like, expanding on the issues and complexities around open science. So I want to start now to just bring it back down, if you like, make it a bit more manageable in terms of how it's expressed, and so we can start having a think about what's sort of practically sort of available to do. So this is a very useful taxonomy provided by the Foster Initiative, which was part of a European Union programme. It's wound down in terms of the new work that it's been doing, but it's still actually running a very active website and training environment. So I would recommend having a look at the website. It's got a lot of materials and videos and things that it's very useful at looking at kind of various concepts and how-tos and the relationships between things. So as you can see there, the taxonomy, it does a lot of the thinking for you, I think, in terms of what does open science actually mean? What does it consist of? Where do things fit? Which things are my problem? And but what can be opened up as well, because again, people don't always have an instant sense of things about policies. How do policies fit in? What's a data journal? All these things are can be taken to a more granular level until there's something that you can actually, if you like, think there's this. I can define this. I can understand this. I can take this forward a bit. So, taking it down a little bit further, I'd say that these are the most probably immediate, useful areas for researchers to bear in mind with respect to their own practice. By which I mean, I think it'd be useful and also manageable to develop an understanding of what these topics mean within your own subject and institutional context. And then if I agree with the rationale that kind of open science, open research is worth pursuing, or if you're under a mandate to comply, or if you want to say participate in a journal which conducts open peer review, that kind of thing, then hopefully you should be in a position where you can actually take action and be able to participate fully and contribute. So I'm also aware that this has been quite a whistle-stop tour already, and I want to have certain time for discussion. So I'm just going to go in a bit more detail into two of these, into open access and open data. So in terms of what can you do, open access is basically functionally it's an online only format, because if it's been printed, if you like, it's not open because the printed forms are limited. So it's got several different if you like categories, I suppose I would think of them as. I've put a few of them there for the main ones for you to perhaps be thinking about. So open access gold means that there's a Creative Commons license, and which means that the content itself is publicly available for reuse, and there are various fine nuances between different Creative Commons licenses, but generally it'll mean that whoever reads it then has the permission to reuse it, usually as long as they credit the original provider. Gold will also mean it's published open access. Ooh. Right, hopefully, if this is possible, I've just tried to be a little bit louder. Yeah, so it should be immediately open access, and forever, and also there's generally been some kind of fee paid, either by the individual that published it, or their institution, or sometimes their funder. And then sort of similarly, the kind of perhaps usually journal that it will be published in will be either wholly an open access gold journal, so all the articles that it publishes have been published in this way, or it could be hybrid, which means that at least some of the material is subscription, so it'll be behind a paywall, but that this particular article has been made open and immediately open. And again, as I say, that so in this instance, the copyright has been made public. It's become part of the scholarly commons knowledge canon. Having said that, there's also green open access, and that's given to forms where there's usually, if you like, it's a step back from that. It'll either be that somebody has had to wait for a certain amount of time, perhaps 12 months is a typical amount of time before something could be opened up. It might be that there is a version of record that's in the journal and behind a paywall, but there could be either a submitted version or an accepted manuscript version sitting somewhere else, perhaps in either the author's repository or website, or in an institutional repository. And again, that then means that the copyright for the version of record will be usually with the publisher. And then so that'll also mean that if people are going to cite or to use something from this paper, they're going to have to be very careful to make sure they don't contravene that. But at the same time, they should be able to access and read using the author's version, wherever that sits. That'll be free. Again, it can be really, really useful in terms of particularly finding if you're not an institute, if you don't have much money, if you're an unaffiliated researcher perhaps, or it's something that you're not sure if you need it and you don't want to have to pay for full access for something, it can be a good way of getting around some of those issues. Preprints have been becoming much more popular in recent years, and that's where an early version of an article, perhaps even the first draft, could be put in a preprint repository. So Archive is perhaps the best well-known edition of this. It's been going for, I think, over 20 years, and it takes mathematics, physics, astronomy, and basically it's free to upload, it's free to use, and free to view, and it's often specifically done to get comments from the community. And then at some point, usually, the authors will sort of take the comments and basically draft a new version, and then that will be the one that gets submitted to a journal. And that's actually becoming an increasingly formalized process as well. A lot of journals now have formal links with, for instance, bioRxiv has a formal link with PLOS. So if you submit to an article to PLOS, they will actually, as part of their workflow, invite you to put a draft in bioRxiv, and I think it's also vice versa. So there's increasing understanding that actually having different versions and then showing the process and the comments perhaps that people posted, provides sort of useful feedback. Preprints are also, I think, very useful because they're immediate. I think one of the problems historically with, for instance, journal publishing has been backlogs, and so somebody could, submit something, and it might take a year to get it peer reviewed if it's if the journal's very overrun, or if it's if for some reason a contentious subject. But preprints go up immediately. And that means that if you like, you can then start pointing people to it if you're confident about your ideas, and also start getting the credit. And actually, then it starts addressing some of those issues that people can have about conducting their research openly. So, as I said, there are certainly sometimes fees associated with open access, particularly with gold open access. If you want to, participate. By making your, say, if you want to send your article to the journal that's like the best one in your field, and you also want it to be open access, it's going to cost. And often those journals can be, very, very expensive. I think Nature is like £5,000 or something ridiculous. Other journals, particularly those published, say, by Hindawi, are a lot more reasonable, but there'll still be a number of £100 dollars. And that can be still very prohibitive. And I think that's a real issue around who gets to participate in research. I think historically you could argue that there was a problem with participation. If you didn't have the funds, you couldn't read the research. But now it's flipped around, and now if you don't have the funds, you can't produce the research or get the research communicated potentially. At least not in all the same level of outlets of publishing, journals that you might wish. So again, I think there are issues around that. There are often waiver arrangements that can be made, but again, it's another barrier to entry. As I say, there are various licensing issues around whether you have a Creative Commons license for gold open access, but then if you then go back into the, if you like, the formal traditional journal workflow, you will end up having to sign over copyright at some point. And again, there are these disputes, or if you like, or pain points around the value, who gets to decide what about whose content. And I think a lot of these things are under a lot of pressure at the moment because of the disruption and the squeeze that, for instance, the publishers are under. I also wanted to make a point about having a reliable publishing outlet as well. As I'm sure you're aware, the very fact of open access, whereby the payment is coming from the author rather than from the institution that wants to read, has created an opportunity for bad faith players. And there are a lot of predatory journals out there, which I think are a particular nuisance to inexperienced or new researchers who perhaps are less aware of the kinds of checks that they can make, or if you like, what they should be expecting in terms of a service from their journals. So it is really, really important that if you are interacting with a journal and who's considering publishing with them, that you make some checks. Sorry, I can see the question. I'll take questions at the end. Things that you can do: you can look up the directory of open access journals, the DOAJ. There's an initiative called Think, Check, Submit, which you can also go through. And basically, there are, if you like, a good thing to do is just compare what a website looks like in comparison with websites that you know are reputable journals. And you'll see there'll be things like memberships of specific organisations like Crossref and DataSite, and you'll be able, there are things that you can do to make sure you don't get tripped up by these predatory outlets. But I would say that is a really important thing to remember. So thinking about open data, I think whereas for open access, the problem is, or the new disruption is around the way that you publish the thing you're already going to publish. So it might be an article or a book chapter, and it's if you like, the model or the way it gets paid for has changed. Traditionally, nobody cared about data at all. Nobody wanted it to go anywhere, and it just would sit either in people's laptops or on a disk, and ultimately get thrown away or forgotten about. But that's changed massively over the last few years, and so people are increasingly being perhaps mandated or at least encouraged to make their data available. Often at the point of publication of relevant articles, but also periodically, just at the point, just as a result of having done the research. So in terms of outlets, the two that I would suggest are the most viable are trusted repositories. So again, that might be someone at an institution, or it might be there are general repositories, or there are subject-specific repositories. Also, there are emerging data journals, which themselves can take a certain amount. I think GigaScience is good for that. They have their own repository, and will look after data well. But I think what is perhaps too big an ask is to go into too much detail about what you could do with what kinds of data. But just to think, I mean, data for anyone, for any project, could be it's anything that you produce in the course of your research. It could be big files, small files. It could be images. You've got software. You've got models. And model outputs. You've got searches even, and any of these could be important or less important for keeping in the longer term. I think in terms of thinking about the open research, if you like, a way of thinking about what is important to keep is what's needed to be able to show my working, to make my work eventually sort of reproducible, that someone could go through and understand the decisions that I made, and be able to potentially rework my experiments. But in the meantime, though, what I put up there, this is actually Tim Berners-Lee's, the guy that invented the internet. It's all his fault, and it's his 5-star data model. And I think as a result, it shows, if you like, the way that you could do something, and then you might be able to do it a bit better by going up a star. So making your stuff available on the web, stick a PDF somewhere, make it structured, have Excel, but then make it non-proprietary, CSV. Then have URLs. I would also say, actually, have a persistent identifier, ideally, which would be like a digital object identifier, or DOI, and then link it to other people, so you provide that context as well. So again, if you think about what is going to be most helpful in the future, and I think as well, what's also important to remember when you're at the in the earlier part of your career is this is something which people later on in their career really wish they'd done. So if you're at an earlier point in your professions and your research and so forth, this is an opportunity to do yourself a massive future favour, and to be able to build on your own legacy. Actually, make a legacy, build on it, and be able to link back to it, because I'm sure you're aware, over time links break, things get lost, memories fade, people move institutions, and so the more you can do to document and publish, make available what you've done, the more it helps you more than anyone. So I also wanted to point to some other things that you, the individual, perhaps through your institution, can do in terms of finding out more, or learning more, or even or participating, if you like, providing your own opinion and work, because basically I think what's hopefully very clear is that this is still ongoing. This is an entirely a transition time, if you like. So I wanted to flag up these 3 initiatives. The Research Data Alliance. Any individual can join at no cost to be able to have access to all the documents that Research Data Alliance produces. So it's an international organisation, and it has a range of stakeholders. It has scholars, it has funders, not governmental organisations, publishers, other providers of interest to research data, and they get together and they try to improve things, if you like. It might be around software citation rules. It might be how to manage drone data, or there's quite a lot of work being done around wheat and crops generally, agriculture, social sciences. Funders are interested in things like national research data strategies as well. But so basically, any individual can, at no cost, join any of the groups and participate in the groups. The meetings, the plenaries, come around every 6 months. They're being conducted online nowadays, and I think it costs $40–50 to attend, and online. So again, the bar to entry is very, very low. And I wanted to think about Force 11, which has been around actually the same sort of time as RDA, and that's very much a kind of organic group of people interested in research communication. Tends to have an emphasis on technology, on software, on workflows, and on things, making things very, very open as well. So they'll kind of be places where unpaywall happens. And again, it's completely free to join. You can be on mailing lists, you can be in working groups. Again, they have an annual conference, and I'm actually not sure if the next one's going to be online or hybrid. But again, they're very interested in global accessibility and solving the problems that people have, if you like. Their summer school, so Force 11 summer school, is called FISCI, so Force 11 Scholarly Communications Institute. And that's actually just opened its registration for this summer. So every summer it runs for a week or two. It's online only nowadays, and basically it's a place that you can learn about fair data, open access, new metrics, negotiating skills, and basically have all sorts of discussions with other people. Again, the summer school, there are actually a lot of bursaries, so particularly early career researchers are very often able to take advantage of that for free. And it runs sort of multiple editions of each session, so to make sure that wherever you are in the world, you're awake for the entirety of your course, which I think is also really important. So again, those are places that you can go to find things. So and I just wanted to say, so hopefully that's all made sense in terms of an overall picture. I hope I also haven't just depressed people too much. The landscape is very disrupted, but I think that also provides a lot of opportunities for people to to be innovative, to think about new sort of technology solutions, and to become involved. So there are obstacles, there are barriers. We've talked about a lot of them. I mean, people are also trying to address them. So again, that there are opportunities to speak and to contribute to the way that things are developing. So more choices, as I say, whereas you had to be, if you like, a bench scientist or frontline, historian, or you had to be identified as a wholly a researcher to contribute to research. Now there are increasing research-oriented careers opening up. You can be like a data steward or a research software engineer, and so forth. But also, I think the earlier you are in the career as well, the more, I think, opportunity and probably more capacity you have to make a difference and to be able to ride this wave, if you like, to somewhere more positive and hopefully more useful for everybody. So that's the end of the talk, and I'm aware that there have been some questions, so I will open up the chat and have a look at those now. Right. So please, people, do put your questions down. Professor Amaya, should I just go through the ones that are in the chat so far?
Now we'll open for the questions, of course, one by one. If they ask, of course, you can go through. If any questions left over in the chat box, that also we can address. Students, one by one, you can ask the questions. Then Madam, she will be able to address those. And once the questions are over, whatever you mentioned in the chat box, we will address those also.
Sorry, do you want me to start with the ones in the chat box or finish with them?
Yeah, please go on.
Okay, sorry. Right, so someone has asked, what is a good quality of researchers? So is this the qualities that I'd want to expect to see from a researcher? Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that researchers are self-selecting, intelligent, driven people who are curious and want to ask questions and keep keep going at problems and to find solutions. So I think that the competitive life of a researcher can be just very difficult for a lot of people to manage. It can be a bit cutthroat. And I think it can therefore start to reduce some of those positive qualities that people might start with. So I think the first thing that I would hope for a researcher is that they can remember why they began their career in research and be able to kind of keep that curiosity and sort of open-mindedness and desire to know and to collaborate as part of their practice. I really want to generally see, if you like, collaborative, reciprocal behaviour be rewarded in the system. Is starting to happen, because that is ultimately, I think, what will improve research overall. So I think that is what I think. It's difficult, but I think that is what can happen if you can keep that large-heartedness and help other people. That ultimately that will provide, that will be rewarding, if you like, hopefully in the longer term. So I think the same person's asked, what are the duties of researchers? And I think that's really interesting. I think the responsibilities of researchers have been, that's possibly the thing that has been under discussion more than anything else for researchers, and you still do research. What is your duty to your colleagues, or the research that you did in the past as well? I think people would invariably finish a project and go and just think about the next thing before. And as I think nowadays there's increasingly a sense that you have continued responsibility for what you did in the past, and it might be people need to be able to contact you to ask questions about your data, or you need to be able to I suppose justify to funders why you need new money to do something that's quite similar. So again, I think that the duties to your own research and your own legacy are becoming more developed. Other duties. Yeah, I think just integrity generally. I think integrity of behaviour, as far as possible. Oh, sorry, that was quite loud. So somebody has asked about peer review. I wonder if that means they want to know about open peer review. So blind peer review. So say single blind peer review, which is the version that I'm most familiar with, is where somebody is contacted to review an article. Usually several people will be contacted by the editor of a journal, and they will know who the author of the paper is, which is the single blind. Double blind is where they don't know who the author of the paper is, but the author of the paper doesn't know who the reviewers are. The reviewer will prepare, a response. They might be asked to respond to some specific questions by the editor about the contribution to the subject, whether the methods are right, whether the data are correct, or whether everything's there, whether they recommend it for publication if there are problems with the language, that kind of thing. And they'll send in a recommendation for accept, or perhaps minor changes or major changes, or reject, and so forth. And then the editor will convey the decision. And if, as I say, if it's the single blind version, the reviewer knows what they said about the author's article. The author does not know who provided the opinions. With open peer review, again, there are a couple of different versions of that. There can be, if you like, where that process is run, but it is then run with everybody knowing who everybody else is. So the author will know, that the who the reviewers are, but it is still all kept within the confidentiality of the review process, if you like, of the publishing process. It's not generally known. It's been known by the people who actually do it. A more open version will be where the actual reviews might even be published, and the names of the reviewers are given on the website. So again, so it's not only that the everybody knows who everybody else is within the actual publishing process, but also the world knows, and the world can see exactly who said what, and they'll be able to also see if, so for instance, if it's an article that there was an initial version, and then there are open reviews, and then there's a final version, they will also be able to see what the author did in response to the peer review. So and I think that's where people, particularly early on in their careers, feel very concerned, because, if you like, that becomes a part of their permanent scholastic record, and if they inadvertently or knowingly provide something very critical to somebody who has a lot of influence in their field, they may well feel concerned that that's going to have a bad effect on their long-term career. So I think those were the questions that were in the chat. I can see people are still putting questions in, but is there anybody that wants to actually ask me a question with their voice, if you like?
Students, you have any questions one-to-one, or you want to send it by chat box?
Good evening, madam.
Yeah, please go on.
Madam, I had a doubt on what are the challenges that a researcher might face if the data is not available free of cost in the public domain. Suppose the researcher wants to do the research in this field of study that free of cost, and suppose it is a intellectual property. So how to access the intrinsic value of the data? So what all might be the challenges he might face?
Yeah. You're talking about the data, or an article, or anything?
Basically, the information that has been patented
or patented, you're talking about?
Or the intellectual property, something that is not free of cost.
Okay, so something that's not free. Okay, so I think that obviously this can be a real issue. I think there are often ways to get to the information if you're prepared to take a bit of trouble, if it's something that's very important for you. Data, for instance, even if it's not perhaps immediately openly available, a lot of repositories or data centers will provide access to registered users. So it can be as simple as simply becoming, making sure you're kind of a known and trusted user. Like a lot of the, say, NIH data repositories will, once they've verified you, will give you access to things. In terms of, if you like, articles, other information that are behind subscription walls, there are various things like Unpaywall, which if you log on to that, it tries to provide some sort of direction, switchboard, if you like, to give you an idea of what's the best version that you can see of something. So it might be you don't have access to the main article in a journal, but you can potentially access something in an institutional repository, and it might be the accepted version. Personally, I've been on both sides of this. You could try emailing the corresponding author. That can be effective. Sometimes looking in something like Zenodo, a lot of people increasingly are putting versions in Zenodo. ResearchGate and other scholarly communication networks can be very useful. for pointing you to versions of things that are not behind a paywall. As an ex-publisher, I absolutely would never suggest to anybody that they should contravene copyright. I really wouldn't. But there are all of these things are quite reasonable to do, if you like. Again, sometimes even with authors, they will quite often have tokens, if you like, where they can actually send you a token and you can view it online, and it's part of their package for having provided an article. Let's see what else. Yeah, if it's a scholarly society, they will quite often be sympathetic as well. If it's a scholarly society-owned publication, or they're actually the publisher, their core mission is to advance their area. So they may do something as a one-off. So I think those are hopefully that's a reasonable set of things to start with. Who's next?
Next, please. Any more questions? Pranav?
Ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes,
please
hello.
go on.
Can you listen me?
Yes.
Yeah, go on.
I can hear you. I can't see you, I think.
Ma'am, what is the difference between the descriptive research and dynamic research?
Descriptive research and dynamic research.
Ma'am?
Was that the
Yeah.
question, the difference between them?
Yeah.
Do you mean in terms of the outputs?
Ma'am, what is the duty? Hello?
Hello?
Can you listen to me?
I can hear you. I can hear you. But
Go
yes.
on.
Are you asking what the difference is between dynamic and descriptive?
Yeah, the
Articles.
difference. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess what I would think of is that the traditional, as we were saying, way of describing your research was something that fitted into a paper journal. So it's pretty much just something that's can be printed, that's got perhaps tables of the data, and images and figures, and then written words. Whereas something that's executable or potentially dynamic would be something which is searchable, where perhaps you have a data set and then you have a tool to be able to visualize what the data look like. And then you've got and perhaps figures that you can download separately and manipulate, and where you can click into things like the citations. Perhaps you go forward and back in terms of looking at going straight to the citations list that this article has got, and then also seeing what articles subsequently cited it. And going into, perhaps the authors have got ORCIDs or links, and you can go into what they are, what they're doing now, or other things like that. So you can interact with the article directly. Hopefully, as well, there will then be dynamic links to perhaps subsequent versions. So if there are any kind of corrections or updates, or or other relevant articles, you can see those, and then perhaps there will also be connections with things like open peer review, and a link to and a link or other information about how to access full data or source code. So again, it's trying to just enrich what the final kind of user. It's what you become, not a reader but a user, and also enables you to search the article for the thing that you want or need. And it might be that you only want one of the figures or the data, or it may be that you actually need the methods, but you're able again to kind of hone down onto that, and hopefully reuse as easily as possible. So who's next?
Pranav, are you clear?
Now, what is the duties of the researchers?
Are
I thought someone had already asked. I thought I'd already answered that one.
Already asked, actually replied also. Why you're asking same question?
Ma'am?
Yeah, please go on.
The researchers.
Hello. Hello.
So who's next?
Hello. Jacob Anthony, any question?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. Hello. Any more questions?
I mean, there's a bit more in the chat.
Yeah, there's one question actually. What are the framework of open data?
Ooh. I mean, what's the context of that? I can think of different ways of expressing that.
It says what are the framework?
I mean, ultimately, the benefits of open research practices, or the hoped for benefits, as we've said, are that things become, if you like, it increases transparency and integrity. And what I didn't go into, it's not fun, is it, in any detail, but you'll hopefully be aware that there have been various scandals in recent years. There have been a lot of paper retractions, and potentially, previously eminent academics who've had their reputations ruined when it's turned out that they, for instance, just made up their data, and no one was able to check because, if you like, it was behind, it was in a black box, in a way of speaking. So the hoped for benefits are that they include making research more trustworthy, keeping us honest, and also making other people able to see how those things were arrived at. But also, I think there is a hope that by expanding what is available in terms of information about research, it will improve practice generally. As people learn how to do open research, and people will be able to become more collaborative, and tools will be developed to support that. And in fact, you could say, well, hopefully in the end, new questions can be asked because of the more rich seam of knowledge that we'll be able to ask the questions of.
There is a question, madam. What article is preferred more by editor of journal, concept based or empirical based?
Okay, I'm going to say it depends on the journal, and depends on the editor. I think sometimes it's just worth us just writing to a particular editor and asking what they're interested in, and what they want to hear. Certainly, from my time as a publisher, I think the things that we very much wanted were things that were people, we could have had something at the end, and again, it was something that other people could potentially use or benefit from, rather than something which, if you didn't want just a case study, you wanted, if like, the implications and potential translational benefits or consequences of what you found out, and given more kind of general context, for instance. So, and I think that there's also stuff around what's more kind of cutting edge. So I suppose that might be more concept based. But again, around the open access, open science argument, is there's also increasingly a move around publishing sound science as opposed to exciting science, if you want. And that's around the fact that one of the problems with having things like really prestigious journals like Nature, which publish only a tiny percentage of what they get sent, is that they then disproportionately publish things that are actually not typical or not representative of a field. And they give them disproportionate sort of weight in terms of how they are thought of in that field. And then that in turn encourages people to try and sort of work their results, work the way they do things in order to get the surprising results. And I think there's increasing recognition that actually what we need is something that's more representative research findings, and that might mean that particularly with a lot of open access journals and so forth, that it's worthwhile publishing things that don't surprise you, but just as a, if you like, to show an instance of, you know, this is what we expected to find and we found it, which actually increases the balance of emphasis that we need to put on this particular area and this particular finding. If you like, almost like systematic reviews, becoming more the kind of thing that people are taking interest in. Because I mean, as I say, that it can, having what was just saying, this thing happen in Nature, if you like, it pushes people to the boundary of what is ethical. And sometimes people go beyond that, they're chasing that fame, if you like, and then it becomes difficult to know when you're overstepping that bound. Okay.
Students, any more questions? Last question.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yeah,
Madam, good evening, madam.
Good evening.
We are trying to publish one research paper in the Scopus journal, madam.
Mm-hmm.
The journal name specially says Ugudimas Multidisciplinary Journal.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, we are seen in the Scopus page. It is visible, and also source homepage also available. Last Monday, we are again see in the Scopus page the source homepage removed by the Scopus team, madam. In India, Scopus paper publication is must. It is mandatory by the UGC.
Yeah.
How we can approach this type of activities, madam, and also which was removed by the Scopus team, the particular source homepage are cloned one. How we are aware about this type of fraudulent activities, madam? Please help me.
So you submitted your article to the journal, and it was showing up on Scopus as having been published. Then it got taken down again. Is that right? And can you tell me again how it got taken down, or who did that?
Yeah, the journal actually withdrawn, maybe because of predatory activities found.
Okay, so actually I will stop sharing. And I will quickly get to the website. I want to make sure I give you the right website. I'm not 100% certain who did what in that instance. I think that might be a bit difficult to unpack it now. But I'm putting a the website into the chat, and it's for COPE, and that's the Committee on Publishing Ethics, and they've got basically it if you like answers quite a few of the questions that that people might well have around what are the duties of the editor and of the journal and the publisher and the author in terms of what they write and what they produce and how they deal with each other. And it has flowcharts and things. So I think you may well be able to find what your situation on that flowchart. If you do, it will tell you what to do. I would say I think probably pretty much all journal. I mean, when you say Scopus Journal, do you mean published by Elsevier, or do you mean it's indexed by Scopus?
Yes, madam.
So, do you know who
many of the Scopus journals are not replying within a month or 2 months. It will take much more time. I think nearly more than 6 months they are replying our first review comments given to the author. It is so very difficult to complete the research work on time. Especially in India, UGC mandated to publish at least two paper in Scopus journals, but most of the standardized Scopus journals are not accepting and replying on particular time or right time. It is very difficult to doing research in India, madam.
Okay, and you've tried to talk to the editor, and it's taking a long time. I think, again, it's possible that you could try and talk to whoever it is that's managing the peer review. If it might not be the editor, but let's have a think. I think you're going to have to just try COPE, and then if you're able to go back to the editor and quote what COPE says they should do, and again explain about the problem with the timing. I know that a lot of editors are very sympathetic for early career researchers who are under that kind of pressure, so it might be worth trying again, or get somebody who's sort of senior from your department to try.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Okay.
If you know any management channel, please guide to me, madam. Thank you. Management, School of Management.
No.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Now, sir, good evening, sir. You need to unmute, sir. Yes, sir. Now.
My phone is unmuted. Right.
Yes, sir. It is audible, sir. Now. The students and respected today's speaker, Dr. Frena Murphy, as I told you, of course, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, he was busy in a meeting, he could not, now he joined. Actually, I would like to request Honorable Vice Chancellor to give his inaugural address.
Thank you, Professor Bhaiya. I am delighted to be here amongst a lot of preliminaries in the subject. And the topic being discussed is artificial intelligence and the future. Hello, am I audible, please?
Yes, sir.
As I said, the topic is artificial intelligence and the future of libraries and the use of books. Very important topic, I'm sure. And I'm very happy that Dr. Jason has joined in. And he will be with our members here and young staff members as well as our students. As I said, the topic is very important. Artificial intelligence in the days to come is assuming a lot of importance, and the use of books, the future is taking a different direction altogether, and we need to ponder over that what way we have to take our libraries, what shape do we have to give it, exactly how do we use our artificial intelligence in this. The computer scientists all over are busy doing these things, and I'm sure for all libraries also, it will be a very worthwhile exercise. There are a lot of participants here, and I have no doubt in my mind that Dr. Jason's lecture for all of you will be a very useful one. I am particularly keen, as always, on young research scholars who are here to participate in this, and they should take the right lessons from the speaker's lecture, because they are the ones who will be looking for good directions in their research work, and through such lectures, they are able to find one. And once the lecture is over, I would urge all our young staff and the young researchers, young students to interact with the speaker to clarify their doubts and to take a direction in their research work and the future course of action. So I am very thankful to everybody that they have organized this seminar. Dr. Ramaya has taken a lead in this, and I'm sure this is going to be very useful for all the library science department as well as the library staff and all the faculty members present here. They have been organizing this in the past also, and everybody finds it very useful. I look forward to more such webinars in future as well. I'm thankful to Dr. Jason for sparing his time, and in future endeavors of ours, I'm sure he would be sparing and helping us in the best possible way. Thank you very much, and I wish the webinar a grand success. All the best, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. So first, actually, I would like to thank the first speaker before actually introducing the second one. The first speaker we had actually Dr. Frena Murphy, who delivered the talk on open science, and it was really inspiring, and actually a lot of discussion took place. Almost actually half of the time the discussion went on, and the students and faculty members, they participated. And
pardon me for my mention. I was busy in a meeting and I could not attend to the talk of Dr. Frena, but nevertheless, I am sure this talk also would have been a very useful one for everybody, because this is obvious from the fact that you said a lot of discussion took place. In a lecture of this kind, if there is a lot of discussion by the young mind, I'm sure they would have enjoyed the talk and would have been a very meaningful one for everybody. So, Dr. Frena, we are very happy and thankful to you for sparing your time. And I'm sure your lecture will go a long way for the benefit of everybody. Had I been free from that meeting, I would have attended that talk as well. But I was a little too busy in that. So all the very best and thanks a lot for this. Please carry on, Professor Ramaya.
Yes, sir. Now, as a token of appreciation from the university side, we will be actually sending you a memento to your address, and please accept that. We'll be sending this Monday by post your address. So this is the practice which we are following for the past actually few months, and this is the seminar from the DDE and Pondicherry University. Thank you very much once again for sparing your time and actually delivering a very wonderful talk, which actually all the students and faculty members enjoyed. Thank you very much, madam. Now, now actually today's the next speaker is actually Dr. Jason Jeffrey, who is the Director of Strategic Initiative for National Information Standards Organization, Baltimore, USA. And and recently I was also involved with him in one of the international conferences. I was lucky enough in that. And first of all, I would like to actually invite Dr. Jason. I would like to actually, it's my privilege and an honor to introduce Dr. Jason Jeffrey. He is the Director of Strategic Initiative at National NISO, where he works to identify new areas of information ecosystem where the standards expertise is useful and needed. Prior to joining the NISO in 2019, Dr. Jason ran his own technology consultancy company for libraries, and he has been both in affiliate and Meta Lab and a fellow of actually affiliate at Beckman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, and was an academic librarian in roles ranging from reference and instruction to head of the IT at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Dr. Jason written extensively on technology and libraries, including multiple books and a series of actually full periodical issues on technology topics, most recently on AI and machine learning in libraries and library space and smart buildings technology, metrics, iterative design from 2018 onward. He has spoken internationally on topics such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, the future of technology and libraries, decentralization, the blockchain, privacy, copyright, and intellectual property right. He is one of the 8 winners of the Knight Foundation Youth Challenge for libraries for the measure of the future project, an open hardware project designed to provide actionable use metrics for library spaces. He is also the creator and director of the Library Box project, an open source portable digital file distribution system. Dr. Jason can be stalked obviously online and spend his free time with his daughter Eliza, reading, obsessing over gadgets, and preparing for the Invisible Zoomy uprising. So I would like to thank you, sir, for accepting our request and going to give an interesting talk to our student. Now, I request Dr. Jason to deliver his talk on artificial intelligence and the future of the research. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amaya. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully everyone can hear me fine. I am going to share my screen. Give me one moment here. Okay. Okay. So because Google does not like me, I have to quit and come right back. So in order to share my screen. So apologies. This will take just 5 seconds. So I will be right back. All right, so that was fast. Hello, all. Let me try that one more time. Hello, can anyone confirm you can see the shared screen or no?
No, not yet.
You cannot see the screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try this again. Can you see the screen now?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, now coming up. Yes, coming up. Yes.
All right, there we go. It's trying.
It. Yes.
All right. So how about now I hope we'll see a slide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so if you see my slide, we're good to go. Apologies for that. This is very early in the morning here for me, so I'm still getting things set up. Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining me. I very much appreciate the ability to speak with you. It is about 8 o'clock in the morning here for me. I know it is in the evening for you. I wish the world were different and I could be there to be in person with you, but we will do our best to get the presentation across this way. First off, I would like to introduce myself very briefly. That was a wonderful introduction by Dr. Ramaya. Thank you so much. I am Jason Griffey. My background is as a librarian. I have a degree in library and information science. I have worked as a librarian for more than a decade. I am currently not in a library. I am working for the National Information Standards Organization here in the U.S. And I am joining you because a few years back, I wrote, along with a few of my library friends, a small book entitled Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning in Libraries, where we examined the potential for machine learning inside libraries. This is actually available for you for free if you would like to download it. That URL will provide you with a PDF copy of this document, and then the QR code, if you scan it, will also do the same thing. So I'm able to share this with you here today. Give you just a second to note that, and then I'm going to spend the next roughly hour talking to you about a number of things in the world that have to do with artificial intelligence and machine learning. We're going to talk a little bit about the state of AI right now. What do I mean when I say artificial intelligence? When we talk about artificial intelligence, what are we talking about? I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is, how does it work, actually go into a little bit of the explanation of how it does what it does. We're going to look at some examples, both in media and what artificial intelligence and machine learning can do in the world of sort of images and video and audio. What sort of world are we living in, and what sort of changes can be made by AI in those spaces. We're going to talk about library examples of AI and machine learning, and what libraries should be looking at there. And then I want to take a few moments and talk about the sort of future of what AI and machine learning might do in the library and higher education space, and what we may see over the next several years. And then I'll have some concerns and conclusions at the very end. So what do I mean when I say artificial intelligence, right? Like it is a word, a phrase that has a lot of different meanings to a lot of different people. We have sort of two kinds, very roughly, of artificial intelligence that tend to be talked about in the world: weak and strong. Sometimes this is called general or applied. I like the term weak AI and strong AI. Strong AI is the sort of science fiction movie artificial intelligence, right? It's a machine that can think like a human. And there's plenty of examples of that in media and in movies, right? Think of any number of different science fiction novels and or films that feature a strong AI, a machine that just acts as if it is a human being. We don't have this in the world, and there are good reasons to suspect that we will never have this in the world. That this having an artificial intelligence that is capable of sort of the full range of human-like behavior and understanding, it may actually be an impossibility. But what we do have is weak AI. And weak AI is usually, again, this is sort of applied AI. This is where you have a machine system that you teach to do a particular task, and then the machine can do that task by itself without any sort of further human interaction, right? There are a lot of varieties of this. We're going to talk about a number of them, but the key and the difference to remember is that weak AI, which is the AI that we have in the world right now, all around us, is AI that does one thing, sometimes very, very, very narrow, mostly very, very narrow things. So as an example, right, so this is a result from my my phone. This is from my iPhone. I searched in my photos for the word ocean. And when I searched for the word ocean, this was the result. This was the pictures that it gave me back, right? So how did it know that those are pictures of oceans? Well, because there's a small machine learning tool inside my phone that has been trained to recognize what an ocean looks like, and then it compares that training to the photos I take and classifies them, right? But that's all it does. It classifies images. It can't play a game. That AI doesn't know how to play chess. There are AIs that know how to play chess, and there are artificial intelligences, machine learning systems that play chess better than a human, but this AI can't do that, right? It is only capable of classifying pictures, classifying photographs. If we asked it to analyze text, it wouldn't be able to do that either, right? So that's what we mean when we say when I say sort of strong AI or weak AI, is that the AI systems do a very narrow thing, but they do it very well, and they do it automatically without human interaction. These, from a library science, information science point of view, none of these photographs were had carefully curated metadata added to them by a human cataloger. These were classified by a machine, not by a human. And so this is an example of the sort of AI that's all around us, right? Every cell phone these days, every popular phone has, at the very least, a machine learning system that's classifying photographs in the background. And probably several other machine learning systems doing several other tasks for you without your knowledge. So there's an example of a weak AI that is sort of all around us. So AI is only as good as the data that goes into it, right? So the fact that my phone can tell me which pictures I take are pictures of oceans depends entirely on the training that the machine learning system received when it was being developed, right? So it's all about the data that goes in to the training set of the machine learning system in order to determine whether or not that machine learning system is doing is doing a good work and actually classifying things appropriately. So let's look at how a machine learning system, at least one kind of machine learning system, does this with data and classification and things. So there's a number of different kinds of machine learning systems at this point, a number of different models. All of them, however, depend on a couple of functions in order to sort of get them moving, in order to get them doing what we want them to do. Those two things are data and training. The machine learning system has to have a large amount of data that has to do with the sort of thing you're teaching it, right? If I want to teach a machine learning system to identify different kinds of fruit, then I need photographs of lots of fruit in order to show it, right, to teach it what the different kinds of fruit are. If I was training it to determine what kinds of animals it saw, I would need photographs of animals. If I'm training it to recognize faces, then I need photographs of lots of faces in order to teach it, right? So we have to have a data set that is related to the skill you're trying to teach the machine learning system. And then you have to take that data and train the system. Tell it which ones are good, right? Which fit your desired outcome, and which one doesn't fit your desired outcome. So in the example here of training it to identify fruit, right? We give it a lot of photographs, and then we tell it, okay, that is an apple, this is a banana, that is a pineapple, this is a peach, that is a coconut, etc. So we tell it, right, which kinds of fruit each photograph is, and then over time it learns to identify what those different fruits are, and you can then give it raw input and ask it what kind of fruit is this. So you have to have data, a lot of different examples of the thing in question that you're training it to do, and you have to have training. You have to have a human somewhere in the process to say, okay, yes, that's a positive example, or no, that's a negative example of the thing you're trying to do. You can also take machine learning systems and put them together in various ways in order to have them work together to generate an end. And this is my favorite example. There's lots of examples. This is just one way of understanding how machine learning systems might work together in order to do something for us. So this is a quick example of what's called a GAN, a G-A-N, a generative adversarial network. Excuse me. So this is an example of a machine learning system where we want it to create something for us. And we have two different machine learning systems that are going to work together in order to do this. We have one is called a generator. It creates new things. And the other is called the discriminator, which is the piece of the machine learning system that decides whether or not the thing that was created fits our model, right? So you have something that creates and something that decides, so that you have effectively sort of data and training going on in this system. So the way this works is you have a lot of data. Let's say this particular system, we are trying to train it to create pictures of cats. We really like cats. And what we want is an artificial intelligence. We want a machine learning system that does nothing but make us pictures of cats. All right. So how do we do that? Well, we start by giving it lots of pictures of cats. We download hundreds of thousands of pictures of cats from the internet, and we give it to the discriminator and say, this is what a cat looks like, right? Here are all of our examples of cats. Here are all of our cats. And then we go to the generator and we say, okay, make us a picture, right? Well, the first picture that it makes is going to be garbage. It's going to be just nothing because it doesn't know what it's doing. You've asked it to do something where the generator, right? These are not connected in any way yet. So the generator just says, well, I don't know what you want. Here's a picture of static. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, the key then is that you give the generated data to the discriminator. So you're taking the output of one machine learning system and using it as input in the second, right? And you say, does this look like a cat? Right. You ask the machine learning system, and the machine learning system, the discriminator, says, no, 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 no. That does not look anything like a cat. This is what a cat looks like. And the generator is then asked, well, okay, we'll do that again, right? Make another picture. And then it creates a second picture. And that second picture is probably a little closer to what a cat looks like because it's learned a little bit. But it's still not really a cat, right? But this is a computer system, and it can do this hundreds of thousands of times a second, right? It can take this data, ask the question, generate something new, determine whether it's correct, ask the question, generate something new, determine if it's correct. It can do this cycle thousands and thousands and thousands of times every second. And so in a very short amount of time, this system is going to be generating pictures of cats. It's going to be creating entirely new pictures of cats based on the model data and the training that we fed it, right? So this is a generative system using machine learning. So this is just one example of the sort of system that you could have in a machine learning example. So let's look at the sort of examples that the sort of things that you can do with systems like this. Right? What do you do with these sorts of machine learning systems? Well, so here's a great example, right? The example I used was, let's make pictures of cats, but obviously you don't have to make pictures of cats. You can make pictures of anything, including people. So here is a test for you. One of these photographs is of an entirely fake person that was generated by an AI system, right? So one of these is real, and one of these is not a real person at all. They are entirely a fake person, okay? So take just a second, look at the pictures, and I want you to think, in your head, which one do you think is real? Do you think the one on the left or the one on the right is real? All right. So everyone is wrong. I lied to you. They are both fake. Neither of these are real people. These are both entirely fake people generated by a machine learning system. When I started doing this sort of presentation and talking about the things that machine learning can do for us, it took really high-end computer systems to do this sort of work. You had to have a very expensive computer to do sort of the creation of these sorts of images. And now it's a website. If you visit the website thispersondoesnotexist.com, it will create new people for you at the click of a button. It's just a website that does nothing but generate fake people for you. So it's gone in just a few years, just a couple of years. It's gone from the sort of thing that's a very expensive computing exercise to the sort of thing that is a service on the web, just a website. So other examples of the sorts of things that machine learning systems can do with media, right? And this is just, I want to show you some of the things we can do with pictures and with video before we get to sort of books and text. So this is actually a photograph of my grandmother. This is my maternal grandmother, and there's several AI systems, machine learning systems, that have been trained to take old black and white photographs, right, old photographs, and to colorize them, to make them in color, right? So it's been trained on old photographs and new photographs, and understanding what, likely colors of lips and eyes and hair are, and it will automatically sort of colorize photographs for you. The example here of my grandmother is is good. This is an interesting example, but it can be very, very good with enough training data. So this is an example of a photograph here from the Depression era U.S. from the sort of the 1920s here in the U.S. Being colorized by a machine learning system called De-Oldify, which I'll have the URL for here in just 1 second. This is the sort of thing that can be done just automatically with an AI system. And it doesn't have to just be still photographs, right? It can be moving pictures as well, because video is just a series of still photographs. It's the same thing. So you can do, this is a clip from the film Metropolis by Fritz Lang. And you can take old movies and do a similar sort of thing where you basically give them to a machine learning system and have them turned from black and white into color. This one is even, I think, more remarkable in a lot of ways. So this is an example of a machine learning system being trained to understand what human faces look like and to understand what video of human faces look like. So this is, again, the same picture of my grandmother, right? This is the same picture I showed you a moment ago. This is using a system called Deep Nostalgia. The system takes still photographs and then makes them into video of the person in question, right? Now, it's not perfect. It's a little, you can, if you watch it carefully, especially if you watch it several times, you can tell that it's not sort of real video of my grandmother, but it's pretty good. And this is as bad as it will ever be. It will never be any worse than this, right? Computing and systems will only get better over time. And so over time, this sort of thing will look more natural. It will be more real, if you want to understand it that way. So this is another example of the sort of things that machine learning systems can be trained to do these days. I concentrated a lot on video and on visual because it's very easy to see, but you can do this sort of work with other types of media and with other types of creativity, sort of. This is an example of an AI that's trained on music, and it takes a song and separates the instruments from the voice and gives you two different tracks, right? So you can take any song and drop it into this AI, and it will analyze it and pull apart the voice and the music, which is kind of magic if you know anything at all about audio. It really is sort of magical to see this do what it does. Again, it's not perfect. It's a little messy, but it is very, very good for what it does. So it's not just video and photographs and things. It's also audio that you can manipulate in a variety of ways and other things, right? So this is another example of the sort of machine learning systems that are out there these days. For those of you who may be developers or coders or programmers, GitHub, which is a very popular tool for programmers, has a system called Copilot, which will watch what you are writing and suggest what you may need as the next part of your program. So it will understand the sort of coding you're doing and then give you suggestions for the next part of the program that you may be writing through AI. So it's kind of like having an invisible friend helping you program. as you go. So again, sort of thing that an AI can be trained to do. So let's look at a few library examples. Let's see, what sort of work can be done by machine learning systems in libraries with information rather than with photographs and things. Certainly lots can be done already. You're probably having ideas and thinking through the sorts of things that might be done with media inside a library using some of these tools. But let's talk specifically about sort of library tools. There are a number of library tools sort of in the world, or tools that are library adjacent. A couple of them that I'll just point out right now. One of them is called Anif, ANNIF.org. Anif is a system that is trained to take text and apply subjects to it. So you have in a very classic sort of cataloging way, it will take a text and then generate the subject vocabulary for that text. So you can classify things much more quickly. It is trained in several languages. It isn't every language in the world, although they're adding things all the time. This was originally developed in Sweden, I believe, and so it has Finnish and Swedish as well as English. You give it text, and it will say, this is, insert controlled vocabulary. This is about the United States. This is about the University of Oxford. This is about. It will give you sort of subject headings for the text in question. So super useful for cataloging and for sort of doing first passes at large cataloging jobs. One of my favorite examples of the sort of thing that you can do when you put a number of machine learning systems together. This is not directly a library tool, but it's so obviously the sort of thing a library should be doing that I always like including it. This is a search engine called Flim, F-L-I-M, flim.ai. And this is a search engine that has indexed films, mostly U.S. films, although some non-U.S. films, but mostly U.S. films. It has indexed the frames of those films. So all of the individual pictures that make up a film, it has indexed all of those. And then it has applied a machine learning system in order to determine what's in those frames. So as an example, this search result you see here is me searching for a red car. I said, show me films that have red cars in them, right? And it isn't always correct, right? There are a number of images there that are red with a car, but the car is not red, or red but not a car at all, right? There are a number of incorrect search results, but in general, right, being able to search for a film that has, a green jacket in it, or films that only have beaches in them, or for someone who's doing media research, or for someone who's doing a variety of scholarly sort of, endeavors on media, this is an amazing tool. It's the sort of tool that years ago you couldn't have even imagined having, right? It's just too much data, no way to index it, no way to do the retrieval and make it work. No, it's a search engine that even 10 years ago probably couldn't have existed. But now, here it is. And it's, again, only sort of the first the first of these complicated, fully featured search tools. One can imagine applying this sort of idea to a number of things, right? Including library catalogs, where if we had access to things like the electronic text of the works in question, we could surface ideas and not just titles and authors. We could say, show me books that have horses in them, in a way that is far more robust than just subject cataloging is. We could actually understand what's inside the books in the way that this search engine understands what's inside the movies. And this is really only works with machine learning and AI. There's no way to do this without those tools. And then finally, my favorite example of a library tool that's built with machine learning. And this is a tool that was actually built by a librarian. This was a tool that was built by a librarian named Andromeda Yelton. She had access to the electronic theses and dissertations at MIT. And so she built a tool called Hamlet, How About Machine Learning Enhanced Theses. And this indexes all of the electronic master's and PhD papers at MIT, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. What's different is that it's a search engine and it indexes them, but it doesn't do it with any humans. It's only using a machine learning system to do the indexing and understanding of what these papers are about. And so if you search for oxygen, right, you might get papers from biology, where oxygen is obviously important, or you may get papers from rocketry and outer space exploration, because oxygen is a fuel system in those ways, right? With a tool like Hamlet, you could actually say oxygen rocket and only get those theses and dissertations that have to do with oxygen as a fuel and not oxygen in living things, because the machine learning is smart enough to identify and know that those are different clusters of ideas. So that's one example. My other favorite example is you can actually give Hamlet an existing text. So let's say you have a paper, you find a paper, right, that is important to your research, and you want to find other things like that paper. Well, you can actually give Hamlet that entire paper. You can just upload the paper to Hamlet. Hamlet will analyze that paper and then give you other papers that are like that paper, right? So if you give it a paper about chemistry, so let's say, nitrogen-based chemistry, to stay with rocketry, if you give it a paper about nitrogen-based chemistry, it will return to you papers about nitrogen-based chemistry and not papers about nitrogen as a fertilizer in biology, right? It's an amazing tool. My favorite example is that when the first time I saw this tool, I was interested in trying to figure out where its limits were. And so I gave it the text of Peter Pan, the J.M. Barrie novel, the English fantasy novel about the boy who will never grow up. So just Peter Pan. I gave it that, and I asked it to give me PhD theses that were like Peter Pan. I expected it to fail. I expected it to fall apart and to not, either to give me nonsense or to give me maybe papers about flying or something. Like, I expected it to be wrong, but I wasn't sure how it would be wrong. And that's the interesting part, right? In testing it, Instead, what it gave me was all of the creative writing theses from MIT. I didn't even know MIT had a creative writing program, but the system was smart enough to look at Peter Pan and say, well, this isn't research, this is creative, this is a piece of fiction, and then to then show me papers that were about fiction rather than about, again, flying or aviation. So anyway, fantastic tool, amazing resource. This is the sort of thing that I think we should see in libraries much, much more often. This was built several years ago, and I'm always surprised that other places haven't picked it up. So, all right. So we've given a bunch of examples of the sort of things that machine learning can do now. What do we think this looks like? What do I think this looks like moving forward into the future? Where are we going with machine learning, and what do I think we're likely to see? Well, I think there's a lot of things that we may see, but this is the one that's the most interesting to me, and that is that right now in libraries, a large part of our work, a large part of the work of a library, especially an academic library, right, is tied up in this excuse me, in the research process. What is it that that people do to create new knowledge, right? And undergrads and early graduate students sort of learn this process. There's you find a topic and you search for information and you gather your materials and you evaluate those materials and you take notes from those materials. Excuse me, sorry. You write a paper based on those materials, you cite your sources, you proofread it, and then eventually you publish it, right? This is the normal sort of research process that happens every day in libraries and universities all around the world. Every single one of these processes can now be assisted with AI or machine learning. And there are tools that will help automate each one of these processes. So I'm going to go through several of these. Don't worry, we're going to move very quickly because I don't have a lot to say about each of the tools, but what's important is the sort of arc of the work that's possible here. And I'll provide my slides, so don't worry about having to write everything down too quickly. But so doing your research, right? This is usually the purview of humans. You decide on a topic, and then you go out and you find topics on that research. There are AIs that are beginning to do this for people. Right now, these are mostly in very narrow fields like law or medicine, sort of much more controlled, understandable fields than the entire world of research. Kara AI runs a system called Case Text, which will do automatic case research for you if you're a lawyer. If you're trying to find cases that are related to the case you're working on, you can feed it a case and it will find case law that is in your, in your area. Wisdom.ai, your personal research assistant. It will help researchers and institutions find research based on grants and trends. You can give it your publications and it will find other things that are similar to your publications, right? This is sort of an automated, like a personal research assistant that's run by artificial intelligence in the background. Diffio, again, a very, very similar sort of thing. This is mostly based around sort of business intelligence and looking for research on businesses and corporations, but it's obvious that it could be applied to a number of other things. And then something like Iris AI, research discovery with artificial intelligence, use natural language processing to review collections of research papers or patents and find other documents, right? So these tools take the research process and automate it through AI and machine learning. So it lessens the need for a human to be doing some of that work. Well, surely, the human has to come back in and actually read the things and take the notes and write the paper. Well, not entirely. There are tools like Resumer, which summarizes text for you. So if you give it a paper, it will summarize and take basically the highlights of the paper and give them to you. Scholarcy, which does a very similar thing, summary flashcards for any document that you feed it. So it will look at a paper and determine what the important pieces are and then give you summaries of that. EssayBot, which is my favorite because it says, EssayBot suggests best contents and helps you write. No plagiarism. It's a personal AI writing tool. You give it a title and some research, and it will work to try and write part of a paper for you, including checking your grammar and things like that. And then, of course, once you have something written, you can use AI proofreading tools and editing tools in order to make it sound better. You have systems like Grammarly, where it will analyze your writing and make sure that you're not making grammatical mistakes, or Writing Assistant, which will do a very similar sort of thing, right? Now, these are not available, these sort of systems are not available in every language, for every topic, in every sort of research area. These are not universal, but they are there, and it's a very easy process to see how they sort of get better over time, right? They become less limited in their scope or scale, less limited in the particular language requirements or language limitations they may have. All of those systems will again sort of get better and bigger with more things they can do, etc. And while very early in this talk we talked about weak AI and strong AI, right? Where weak AI does very small things very well. You might say, well, yeah, okay, well, there's a system for this and a system for that, but you can't just sort of automate the entire information creation workflow. You can't, there's no system where you can just sort of give it a topic and it will do the research, summarize them, write the paper, do your citations. Like, there's nothing that's like a magic paper machine. And that's true. There's no magic research machine. But in the same way that when we looked at the machine learning systems that tied together, the generative adversarial network, where you had two of them working together in order to create something, it's very easy, I think, to sort of understand how the pieces may be done by separate machines, but then fed from one to the other. And you might have a chain of machine learning systems, all of which work with you to do a lot of the research process without a lot of human interaction. I'm not saying this is either good or bad. I am simply saying I think it's coming. I think this is a thing that we will likely have to deal with as information professionals and as part of the research and scholarly information world. We're going to have to sort of figure out how to deal with systems that do this sort of work. And again, we haven't seen this yet, but I think we will start seeing it fairly soon. So let's talk through a few conclusions. Let's talk through some sort of concerns and conclusions. What role do librarians have and libraries have in this new world where machine learning systems can do a lot of these things? There's actually huge roles for libraries, for librarians, and for information professionals in these spaces. As we said early on, data is a big part of the world of machine learning. You have to have data, and not only data, you have to have good data, reliable data, data that is not misleading or data that is not biased in some way. Because if you have data that has a bias, then the system you're training will reflect that bias, right? An example here in the United States, there are machine learning systems that are used in the US judicial system, in our court system here, in order to determine sort of fair sentencing for criminal cases. So if someone is found guilty of a crime in some jurisdictions, in some places in the US, there's a machine learning system that will take a look at the details of the crime and compare them to historical data about similar crimes and make recommendations for sentencing of the criminal. So that sounds, it sounds scary to me, but to some people it sounds reassuring that there's a sort of process by which this sort of thing gets done. The problem is that the data that the tool is based on is just historical sentencing data. It's data about what has happened in the past with criminal sentencing. And we know here in the US that criminal sentencing has a huge racial bias, that people of color, specifically in the US, Black people, have a much worse sentencing rate. They have longer sentences for the same crime than do other races, specifically white people. And so the bias that's in that data is then being reflected in the future use of the machine learning system. Libraries and librarians and information professionals know about this, and they know how to help fix data. So data normalization and data, sort of ethical data use, is something that will be a huge opportunity for libraries and librarians moving forward into this sort of machine learning future. The second is training, right? Again, I've said this several times. We have data, and then we have training, and determining whether the data and the machine learning system is doing what we expect it to do is part of that training process for any machine learning system. And again, libraries, librarians, information professionals can understand, can help computer scientists understand that sort of the needs of the training, what it is that may be going wrong in the data that lead to sort of questionable outcomes, and then how to improve the training system based on that data. And so this is something that I think will be a bigger and bigger role over time for librarians and for information professionals. And then the last is sort of the evaluation of the output of a machine learning system. Even if you don't know the data and you don't know the training that went into a system, it is still possible to watch a machine learning system operate and just look at the outcomes, just look at the outputs, and evaluate those outputs to know whether or not the system is being fair or just. That it is a possibility to just look at sort of outcomes of a black box operation and determine, is this tool fair in some way? And doing that evaluation is a really important part of determining whether or not a machine learning system should be used in a particular context. And so this is also something that libraries, librarians, and information professionals are pretty good at and have the tools and skills necessary for. And so being evaluators of the output in order to determine whether or not a system has bias, has problems, has issues, is something that that libraries could easily do. So what are my concerns? about this sort of new future with machine learning systems everywhere and working, you know, in the background for people and things. What are the concerns I have? I have a couple of worries. One is that because of the sort of situation I just described, we only have data about the past. We sadly can't have data about the future. We can only have data about the past. And our past is full of mistakes. And so if we build systems that rely on data that we expect to make decisions in the future without determining whether the data and the decisions are good ones, whether they're just and equitable, then all we're doing is sort of codifying the old mistakes we made and continuing to make them in the future, right? That it's possible for us to believe that a machine learning system is some objective actor, when in reality, what it's doing is just taking the past and making it again. And that is a concern I have, that we may just continue to repeat the mistakes that we have made in the past. And then the second concern, the second big concern I have, is that by outsourcing a lot of decisions to machine learning systems, what in the case of research, the kinds of papers that it brings me back, the kinds of resources that it searches, I may not have a full understanding of the limits of these systems. And if the machine learning system is built in such a way that it only ever gives me things that reinforce my question, then I will never see things that refute my question. I will never see things that disagree with me. I will only ever see things that agree with me. And so there is a potential for these tools to just create filters and bubbles of information that are internally coherent but wrong, because they aren't taking into account dissenting views. If our tool only shows us the things that we want to see, then we are never presented with things that that show us that we're wrong. And that is a big concern of mine for these sort of machine learning systems that help in research processes, because by their very nature, they're trained to find things that we ask them to find, and not things that that disagree with us. And so I'm really worried about that. That is a thing that does concern me a great deal. And then finally, just one last thought before we get to questions and such. Roy Amara was a American researcher and a scientist and a futurist here in the U.S. Roy said, "We tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run." So all of the sort of talk about machine learning and what it might do over the next couple of years, we may be overestimating what it will do, but long term, I think it will have an extraordinary effect on the work we do as information professionals, the work that we assist with in the research and scholarly processes, and in general with the sort of information we collect, with the media that we collect, with the processes by which we sort of understand the works that we're putting into our libraries. All of these things are going to be affected by machine learning, and I think in the long term, it may be much weirder and much stranger than we can sort of understand. And that is the end of my prepared comments. This is me. This is my title, my email address. I am on Twitter at Griffey, if you'd like to follow me there, and then my website as well. Feel free to be in contact with me. Feel free to follow me on Twitter if you're interested in the sort of work I do. I'm always happy to talk and to help where I can. So this is me. I will stop screen sharing here in just one moment and be available for questions if people have questions.
I've turned on their microphone.
All right.
Yeah.
Dr. Ramaya, thank you so much, and I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, dear students, if you have any questions, you can one by one. It was really interesting, and definitely students will have a lot of questions. Hello.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, please go on.
Hello.
So thank you, sir, for the wonderful session. So you had talked about the effects of AI and also the effect on the technology also. So the artificial intelligence, like you had mentioned, is having a positive impact on the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, management fields. And sir, you had also mentioned about the effect of AI on the law, in the field of law also. So how far it can be, how effective will be the artificial intelligence when it comes to the humanities field, and especially the law also, because the STEM field can be scalable. It can be on a monetary basis also. The more research is being done on that field also. So what about the humanities field? How effective it can be, because there we are thinking with the other part of the brain. Many people are saying like that. So in the humanities, so how effective the AI will be in those fields?
That's a great question. You are completely correct that it's STEM fields where the money is, right? Where it will sort of happen first, because they just have more funding than humanities fields in general do. They have a lot of opportunities for grants and things where humanities systems may or may not have those. I do think that in the humanities, what we are likely to see is a lot of the work that's done under what's called digital humanities, right? Sort of using technology to analyze texts and to do a variety of different sort of analyses on texts. We're going to see that start happening in machine learning systems much more frequently. So I think we're going to see interesting scholarship from sort of the analysis of humanities works in machine learning systems. It will be interesting to see how that funding and how that sort of works from a financial standpoint, because there's not nearly as much money. Law, I think law will have an easy time of it because there is plenty of financial incentive to insert tools that make sort of legal processes more efficient and effective. So I don't think that I think law will be sort of along with engineering and STEM and medicine, as far as sort of being able to move very quickly into machine learning systems of varying kinds. Humanities will be a trailing effect, I think. And some of the interesting things that are going to be happening in humanities, I think, are going to be philosophical questions. We're going to have lots of arguments over the next several years as to whether or not a machine can be an author of things, or whether a machine can be a composer of music. Here in the U.S., there's been court cases about copyright and about intellectual property law relating to the outputs of machine learning systems. But I think from a scholarly point of view in the humanities, there's going to be a lot of scholarship done on how machine learning outputs should be treated as art, as creative outputs, as fiction. As we're gonna have a lot of arguments, I think, going on in that space. So it'll be interesting to watch, I think.
Students, any more questions, please?
Yeah. Sir, what do you think about analog computing in terms of AI?
Yeah, so I saw that question there. When you say analog computing, can you give me an example of the sort of thing you're thinking about?
Like adding analog elements to like store data and organize it.
Okay. Yeah, I am not as familiar with what that might look like, honestly. I mean, analog inputs for sort of creative works I'm familiar with, but as far as actual computing, I'm not as familiar with what an analog storage system or an analog computing system might look like. Quantum, I've talked a bit about sort of what might happen once we get past binary, right? What a digital system, but not a binary system, where we can have computing that relies on more than just 2 bits. That is a weird and unusual place to be in computing, but I actually don't know much about the area that you're talking about as far as analog use in that space.
Any more questions, please? Because the analog, anyway, it is outdated. Nobody is using analog. Now we're all in the digital world.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah. While you are discussing about the concern, okay, the second concern is about the filters and bubbles. Can you please say what are the concerns you are facing in the area of filters and bubbles?
I'm sorry, could you say it one more time?
Yeah, while you are discussing about the concerns in AI, and you will be discussing about the filters and bubbles. May I know what are the concerns you are facing in the filters and bubbles, so that it will be useful for our research?
Yeah. My concerns there all have to do with the fact that AI, the machine learning systems and their data that they're trained with tend to, when you ask them to generate new data, they tend to collect things that are similar, right? That's, I mean, sort of the job of a machine learning system is to group similar things when you're asking one to do analysis of a data set. You know, if I ask a AI system, I train an AI system to show me, let's see, what would be a good example? If I tell an AI system that I'm looking for, let's go back to crime and the U.S. I want an AI system to identify areas where I shouldn't move because crime will likely be higher, right? The effect of asking that question, given the data that we already have, is going to be sort of biased because the outcomes are based on data that actually was collected in such a way that has racial bias built into it. And so when I get the results from that query, from that system, it's filtered in such a way that I don't see the entire data set. I only see the data that is sort of already tainted or biased. That's a problem in sort of machine learning systems in general. Another good example is the problems that we've seen over the last couple of years with social media, right? Social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc., use machine learning systems to determine what to show you, right, in your timeline. They usually call it an algorithm. They have an algorithm that, you know, analyzes whether or not it should show you a particular story. That it really underneath there's a machine learning system doing this, and in general, it only shows you things that you agree with. And so, if you have a perspective on the world that is objectively wrong, factually wrong, but it is the perspective you want to see, social media will just continue to show you those things. It will continue to show you factually incorrect, but pleasing to you information. And so that sort of bubble, that sort of filter is terrible for society. That's really bad, because in an ideal world, you would be receiving information that would disagree with you and make you reconsider your own perspectives. And so that is the sort of piece of machine learning that I really worry about probably the most, is that from an information standpoint, if we only ever see things that agree with us, it isn't actually good for scholarship or good for understanding the world or good for society as a whole. We need, as humans, to see people and to see stories and to see perspectives that disagree with our own, so that we understand there are other types of people in the world, that there are other types of perspectives in the world, that our perspective might be wrong, and that we have to sort of think about that, right? That's scholarship does that all the time. Scholars do that all the time. But machine learning is really good at preventing that from happening. And so I worry that if we lean on these tools too much, that we will be in a situation where that is a problem.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions, participants? No, before that, I have a small question. Recently. Yeah, please go on.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have a doubt, as we are discussing about AI, so can you please explain me what is the difference of strong AI and weak AI?
Yeah, sure. So I talked about it very briefly, but the difference is that strong AI is sort of the fictional science fiction, what we see in movies, where there is a machine that is just like a human. They can interact with the world like a human. They can do. You can have an AI system. Excuse me. You can have an AI system that talks to you and plays chess and looks at pictures and does all sorts of things. It's sort of a general AI. It understands the world in a lot of different ways. Those don't exist. A lot of people would like them to, and there are places that are working on sort of trying to create that kind of AI. But the strong AI is just not something that we have in the world. And personally, my research and sort of my perspective, I actually don't think it's a thing that probably will exist. I don't believe that we have the capacity to create that sort of thing. Weak AI is an AI that's trained to do a specific thing, just to look at pictures and determine what's in them, just to play chess, right? We have AIs that can play chess, but if I ask that AI to play a different game, it couldn't, because it's trained on a particular, just that game, right? And that's an example of weak AI. So we have, and that's what we have in the world. That's the sort of AI tools that we have right now, are those that are very focused on a particular problem and doing one thing.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions, please?
So, do you consider hybrid intelligence as a solution to the problems that you had raised regarding the concerns regarding AI? Do you consider hybrid?
Yeah, when you say hybrid, do you mean AI and humans working together? Is that what
Yes,
you're
sir.
sort of? Yeah. Just to make sure. Yeah, yes, I actually think that sort of system is one that could be extremely powerful. That we have humans working with an AI system where the AI is doing a large amount of work, but a human is there to sort of guide, correct, understand, train, right? We have a human sort of in the loop of the processes in order to limit those sorts of problems that I laid out. So yes, and that's, I think, where librarians, information professionals, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity over the next 10 years for people in this space to be that part of that hybrid sort of tool chain. So yeah, I think that's a big part of our future. I think you're muted, Dr. Ramaya.
I muted it. Sorry. Yeah. Now, I have a small question. Now, where actually voluminous data is there, for example, like the meteorology, weather related, for example, like the genome research. Annually, when you do actually, it takes a long time. So these areas, if you apply the AI, we think it will be able to help us in doing the speed of the research and we'll be able to do the better results.
Give me, I'm sorry, one more time. I wanted to make sure I understand the question.
Some areas we produce actually high volume of data. When we want to deal the data, for humanly it takes long time. For example, one is meteorology, weather related. Daily it will become. Another one is genome research. Huge amount will be there. So when we want to do research, of course, if we use these machine tools, and it will help us actually doing better. Actually, is that kind of research is going on? What is the scenario of that?
Yes, that's a fantastic example of where machine learning becomes extremely powerful, right? We have, as you say, right, genomic, weather, there's a number of fields, astronomy, right, astronomic data. There's a number of fields where the data it just vastly larger than any human could ever deal with. There's no way to get enough humans to deal with the data that is in question in some of these fields. And it's the perfect opportunity for a machine learning system to help filter that data and look for patterns and see the pieces that are that then humans should look at, right? To look at anomalies, to find patterns that are interesting in some way. And the keys there are for the training of those machine learning systems to be such that it's flexible enough to identify things, but and not rigid enough to ignore what might be interesting. It's a really tricky thing to teach a system to be flexible enough to identify things that might be interesting to humans, rather than ignoring some pattern or something that might be that it might miss. And so that's absolutely something that's happening. There are lots of places working on in that sort of space. It is a really hard problem in machine learning to do the training and to build the algorithms to make those systems do what we need them to do. But it is, and as you say, there's a lot of places where that's going to be more and more. I mean, oceanic data. There's like climate. There's a huge number of places where that's going to be extremely important over the next decade or two. So that's a great example of where machine learning is going to be really vital in our world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any more questions, students? The last one. If nothing is there, I would like to thank. Any questions? Last one.
I just have one question.
Okay, sure. Last one.
Can you cite some areas wherein this AI has been really very successful?
Sure. The biggest one that I'm aware of right now is in sort of in medicine and in doing diagnoses of specifically of cancer diagnoses. There are a number of AI systems that have been built to do sort of radiology analysis. Radiology is largely driven by the analysis of images, right? You do an image of the internal workings of someone, and then you take a look to see if there are cancerous cells, if there's a problem with the cellular structure inside of a person, right? There are systems that are being built now that analyze those images to determine whether or not it's cancer or whether or not it's something else. And those systems have been extremely reliable in making that determination, often as good as a human at making those decisions. And so that allows for cancer to be found much earlier. It allows for diagnoses of things that need to be treated much more quickly. And so that's an example of where a machine learning system, I think, is doing a huge amount of good. And that's been going on for a few years now. So.
Oh, so good to hear. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much, the participants. I would like to thank you very much, actually, Dr. Jason, who has given an inspiring and informative and educative talk. And I can see all the participants enjoyed and participated in the talk. That's actually very interesting, of course. And as I mentioned, of course, as a token of appreciation, of course, normally this university will be sending a memento to all the speakers. This I'll be sending by Monday by speed post your address, of course.
Well, thank you so much.
So now actually I would like to request my colleague, Commander Rajkumar, who will be actually giving the formal vote of thanks to both the speakers.
Am I audible, Dr. Jason? You can put your headsets. So, I must say, first of all, good afternoon and good evening and good morning. Good afternoon to Dr. Frena Murphy. Good evening to one and all who are a part of this webinar. And good morning to Dr. Jason Griffey. So it's wonderful to present a vote of thanks, and it's a wonderful moment where we are celebrating in the globe afternoon, evening, and morning, at all on the same time. I'm honored and privileged to present a vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Frena Murphy, the first speaker of this webinar, who had enlightened us with the concept of scholarly communications with particular emphasis on open science and open data. Although ma'am is not here, but ma'am's explanation of research workflow has been very elucidate. Once again, thanks to Dr. Frena Murphy. Next, I would like to thank Dr. Jason. And the most important thing which I liked when he mentioned that when he wanted to create an AI based on where we have done a lot of mistakes, it's really insight. And I hope a person of Dr. Jason caliber can only present those insights. So really, really very, very thankful to Dr. Jason Griffey for such an wonderful insights and knowledgeable talk. I am also honored to thank Professor Gurmeet Singh, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of this university, for his valuable guidance and support in organizing this webinar. Without his vision, it would not have been possible for us to organize such a great event. Thank you very much, sir. It is also my pleasure to thank all the statutory officers of this university, students, faculty members, officers and staff, not only for participating, but also for their valuable support throughout. Thank you all. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the Computer Center of the university and entire staff of DDE for putting this event live through the online platform. At last, I thank each and every one of you for your graceful presence for this webinar, and also in advance for the series of webinars which our DDE had organized. And the next one would be scheduled right away at the end of this month. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Commander Rajkumar, and thank you all the students who participated and faculty members, these research scholars, and our regular and distance students, all of course. It is really wonderful, and particularly thankful to actually Dr. Jason's speech is really wonderful, and it's in live and it's more actually what do you call the interesting and actually interactive. So once again, thank you, Dr. Jason. I will be in touch with you